When I was going through ex-gay programs or therapy, it's probably the worst 3 years of my life.
The reason why I attempted suicide was because I couldn't change my sexuality.
I was becoming increasingly depressed, I would say, almost, because I was failing every day. Every day I'd wake up thinking, yep, I'm still gay.
For me, it was more just a sense of failure. It was as simple as that. Oh my gosh, have I done enough? Maybe I haven't committed enough. Maybe I haven't prayed enough. Maybe I haven't been holy enough.
I know of nobody, and I'm an honest person, if they're, I would tell you that has suffered mental illness as a result of a program like ours.
My name's Ben, I'm 22, and I'm from Sydney in St Peters, which is just a suburb near Newtown. I think I was about 6 when I realised I was gay. We used to watch The Little Mermaid quite often growing up. It was one of my sister's favourite movies. And, watching The Little Mermaid, there's Ariel and she's there, in scantily clad clothing, bikinis, whatever you have. There's Ariel, and yet even at 6 years old, I used to see Eric, who, of course is the masculine hero in that, and I was very interested in Eric, but not so much Ariel. I think as I got a bit older, like as I got to 15, I really started to take my faith a bit more seriously, even though I think by then I probably knew I was gay. I wanted to live for God, and I wanted everything in my life to kind of, to be for Him. One of the earliest memories I have from my church and its teaching on homosexuality was sitting there. It's quite a big church, sitting there in a there's probably about 2,000 people in the auditorium, all under 18, and the preacher got up and he said, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and laughed about it, and I was there and I looked around the room and everybody was laughing, and yeah, it kind of really hurt me and really affected me. Even my parents back then, we'd drive down Oxford Street and my dad would yell out the window, effing faggots or just homophobic remarks, and it was often, we'd joke at the table about how camp somebody is and how it's disgusting.
I'm Hannah Burrell. I was born in Manila in the Philippines. I came to New Zealand when I was 17. So I'm 39 years old. I'm turning 40 in August this year. So I lived in New Zealand for about 20 years, and I've lived in Sydney sort of on-off over a span of 3 years. I was 6 years old. I remember this very clearly. I was 6 and I was watching TV with my uncles. It was in Manila, and in the Philippines, it's all about entertainment. You've got all these dancers performing on TV. And I remember, watching this show, and there were all these female dancers, and I knew they were so good, and I felt like saying, oh, they're so good and they're so pretty. I didn't understand then why I couldn't say it, but I knew deep down that I wasn't allowed to say it. And I guess that was, for me, the first time that I thought, something's wrong about this. So my dad was a pastor, and pretty much my whole family was brought up in a Christian home. I think my grandfather found a Pentecostal church on his way to the markets. I spent my weekends going to ministry meetings with my dad and my family, and sort of, just being part of the whole church. And I remember sitting in a church. I was 10 years old, and it was this big congregation, and I thought, wow, this is my life. This is my life. I'm a pastor's kid, and I'm really happy to be one, and I'm going to be in this for the rest of my life. And I was 10, and I had quite a strong conviction that that was going to be my future and my destiny. I don't think there was ever any mention of homosexuality in the church, but you just know it's not right, and that's not something that's really talked about.
Was I born this way? Well, it feels that way. Far back as 5, can remember sitting in the bath with some other boys who were family friends, and I used to love to be bathed with them. There was just something about connecting to their nakedness that really turned me on. I was raised under a very legalistic kind of, you've got to be a good boy and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And even if I varied to the slightest degree, then I got my head knocked off my block or my head knocked off my shoulders or got kicked to kingdom come or whatever. It was a very violent family, a family that wasn't close. So no, it was by no means a Christian family. When I was 15, a friend of mine invited me to go to the local Presbyterian fellowship. Those people loved me and accepted me and affirmed me. Age 11, I was seduced homosexually, right at that crucial time of the developing of adolescent sexuality. And so homosexuality was deeply imprinted into my sexual brain, as it were. And I just became obsessed with homosexuality, and every fibre of my being was homosexual.
For these misfits, these homosexuals, who have a slogan that betrays the evil of the breed. Today's conquest, they say, is tomorrow's competition.
Growing up in the 60s, homosexuality was, well, first of all, it was a criminal offence if 2 men were caught having sex together. You go to jail for that. Secondly, mental health professionals thought that this was a mental illness that could be cured. This is the society I was brought up in. So when I realised that there was a word for what I was feeling, which was homosexual, and that meant I was either criminal or mentally ill, I learned very quickly I needed to do 2 things. Number 1, I had to change it, and number 2, I had to keep it a secret. And I guess it was that then drove me into the church or to becoming a Christian, looking for an answer to change, because I'd already attempted suicide myself. I had already been seeing a psychiatrist in my final year at high school. So it was so difficult to deal with this.
So I grew up in a family where I was the eldest of 3 boys. We lived in a beautiful house in Mount Eliza, which is in the deep south of Victoria. And this is at the farm. Dad, we had a farm in Mount Martha. My initial experience with Christianity was this very strong Baptist kind of fundamentalist perspective.
Oh, thank you.
So I was brought up from a very young age learning about how disgusting, perverted, predatorial gay men are, and how they're all going to hell, and they are a menace to society, and definitely wouldn't even be allowed in the church. They're just these awful people. And this is probably about the time I remember the day that I realised that I was gay was one of the most traumatic moments of my life, where it felt like someone had just dropped, a ton of bricks on my head, and I was trying to fight for survival. Because I thought, oh my God, I'd been brought up to hate these people, and I think I might be one of them. And so the sense of shame was building inside of me. So I just kept pushing it away. And then at the same time, my dad came out, and so the whole family unit was kind of collapsing around me because Dad's gay. So that for me put me back again, thinking, how can I then say, by the way, in the middle of all this trauma, I'm also gay as well, so I can't do that to Mum. So eventually I did come out to Mum, and I said, yeah, look, I think I am, and I'm not sure what to do about that. And then she said, if it's the last thing I ever do, I'm going to make sure you change.
I've always known that I was attracted to other men. I fall in love with men, I don't fall in love with women. Growing up as a Mormon was fun. There's always activities going on, church dances and socials and activities. You've got to understand that being a Mormon is like being a Jew. It's all-encompassing. It's more than just going to church on a Sunday. It's a way of life. There's a whole social network, a dress code, there's recommendations on what you eat, on the activities you partake in. And because it's so heavily family-based, at the time, that's why I wanted to change my sexuality, because I thought that I needed to be married to a woman and to raise a family and do what was required of me. I think the depression started when I was 16, and that's when my parents found out that I was gay. They weren't too happy with that. I was 16 in 1985, 1986. And at that time, we were told by leaders of the church that you're better off with a millstone around your neck at the bottom of Salt Lake than being a homosexual.
Church was redeveloped about 6 years ago. And it's plastic grass, but at least we don't have to cut it. The ministry Living Waters that I lead in Australia is a ministry that helps people in the area of sexuality, maybe particularly those who struggle with same-sex attraction. This is the church where we have a large course. We use the church here. Sexuality, when it's broken, brings a lot of pain. I've been leader of Living Waters Australia for 11 years now, almost 12. Used to be the old church. Can a person change their sexual orientation? In my experience, not only have I seen many others do so, but I myself have. So I underwent, a transformation from utter homosexuality. I mean, I was not remotely attracted to women, to through my deeper relationship with God, with Jesus, being set free from that which, as I said, just didn't witness true to me.
The emails will often begin with, "Your story is my story." Often I'm the first person ever spoken to about this, because there's such a feeling of shame and failure attached to their experience. The term ex-gay was invented in the 70s with people that had felt that they had left homosexuality and had become heterosexual. And that term has stuck for a long period of time, but within the ex-gay movement as such, they have moved away now to often using the term same-sex attracted, or they will use the term unwanted same-sex attraction. Initially, with the ex-gay ministries, the belief was that you could change from being gay to being straight if you prayed hard enough, or if you had demons cast out of you. And when that wasn't working, then it transitioned more into a bit more of a therapeutic sort of model. So they believed it was about dysfunctional upbringing, strong mother, recessive father, that sort of thing. And then, of course, it's moved on from there. As one ex-gay leader here in Australia said, which I thought was very amusing, he told somebody who went to see him about, could I become straight? And the ex-gay leader said, you'll always walk with a limp. The ex-gay ministries are becoming increasingly irrelevant. My goal is to see every one of them in Australia closed down, not because I've attacked them, because I don't see them as the enemy, I see ignorance as the enemy.
The first ex-gay program I did was an online program called The Door of Hope, run by an international organisation called Setting Captives Free. It was referred to me by my church connect leader at the time. He spoke to the pastor, and the pastor thought it would be a good idea if I signed on to that. And so that's a 60-day program that I started when I was 16 years old.
So I came across Living Waters in about late 90s. I thought it was a miracle that I found it. I thought, this is it. This is God's way of telling me that there is a way out, and that He's giving me an opportunity to really seek out, healing.
So in my early 20s, I decided to move to Sydney. Then, when I was in Sydney, I got this letter from a guy from what back then was called Restoration Ministries. And there was this guy saying, there is a group of people in Melbourne that can help you resolve your conflicts. I thought, oh my God, that is just perfect. So I don't have to be gay.
And I realised that there were other people that were attracted to the same sex that also wanted to live the gospel. So that was in early 90s, mid 1990s. I started up the Brisbane chapter of Evergreen.
I believed that I needed to change and would never be accepted. I did so many things to try and change. The first thing that I did was when I was in Bible college in New Zealand, I was sent to be exorcised because the Bible college principal, when I told him what I was going through, he said, "This is a demon." When I left Bible college and came back to Australia, it was still there, of course. So it was there that I submitted myself or put myself into an ex-gay program. So this was a live-in rehabilitation place that I was at for 6 months.
We eventually grew from just me and the psychologist to about 14 of us, I suppose, just over a dozen. We would basically talk about our experiences with each other. We'd sing hymns as well. We would pray. We would have group fast sessions. In the Mormon culture, we fast, so we deprive ourselves of food and water for 24 hours in an effort to become closer to God.
It's a healing program. It's literally called a healing program. And ultimately, the goal is to get you to a point, I guess, where you've overcome your weaknesses, your struggles, and your issues in life. And so I was so excited to join the program. And I mean, I was there, I was committed. It was a 36-week program, I think, from memory. And you go through a big manual of different topics every week, and you attend this group meeting and you talk about your issues. And you're basically surrounded by about 5 to 6 people who are also dealing with a whole lot of different things. That's what I did for 36 weeks. I went there I think it was every Monday for almost a year. So after a year, and I guess I must have shown so much commitment to the group that they thought, hey, should make a good co-leader. And so they approached me and asked me to be a co-leader. And so I did that for a couple of years. I was a co-leader for a couple of years. And so I was working with another leader, just sort of taking the group through. And, it was quite an intense time for 3 years.
My experience as a leader in Exodus International in Melbourne was approximately 2 years. We ran support groups, we had tapes and workbooks and access to American material, and we had Cy Rogers, who was the president, I think you call it, of Exodus, come down and spend time with us. We had people who were married who used to be gay parading in front of the group. We had group support sessions where if someone had sex with someone that was terrible, but they would, then we called it falling, they'd fallen.
I had a mind looking after me all the time. They made me throw out certain items of clothing because they thought these things were gay and shouldn't be worn by man. I was not allowed to do anything in the kitchen because that was woman's work. I was a man. I had to work outside the house, constantly being monitored, listening to Bible tapes every day to try and renew my mind. And abuse, to be humiliated anytime you stepped out of line. I was publicly humiliated. It was a horrific experience. And after 6 months, I just couldn't take it anymore when I left.
So every day I'd go to school, I'd come home, and for about an hour and a half, 2 hours each day, I'd log online, do a lesson each day. Every day there were questions, you know, have you had thoughts about other men? Have you slept with anybody? Have you masturbated? Have you looked at pornography? All of those kind of things, because what they taught me in my church was everything was a sin, including masturbation, pornography, even thoughts about other men. I remember I was quite proud of myself. I lasted for, I think it was about 57 or 60 days or something without, like, yeah, of course, had thoughts about other men, but I lasted that long without looking at pornography or masturbating or anything like that. And I was so proud of myself. You know, I remember I was so completely tense and so, so frustrated and all of that kind of stuff. So it was, and yet though that was the goal, and, you know, you had to try to get that way, because obviously in the programs, masturbation leads to bad things, going to lead to thoughts about other men, pornography, and that's just going to set you back. And that's not what you want.
The open mind.
Those whose activities are exclusively homosexual, however, include approximately 4% of our male population, and we have here a problem of major proportions.
Often it comes as a terrific shock to him, and often he comes to the psychiatrist with this information and he wants to change, observing his propensities and not wanting to accept them. Working with homosexuals or other sexual deviates find that the early parent-child relationship bears a greater relationship to the development of this condition than other factors. For example, we find that one of the most common expressions of difficulty is the aggressive, dominant, controlling mother and a very passive, meek, compliant father. So that the boy, in the development of his psychological life, identifies with a parent of the opposite sex rather than with a parent of the same sex.
This one is written by Andy Comiskey. He's the person who founded Living Waters, Pursuing Sexual Wholeness, How Jesus Heals the Homosexual. There are some other books such as Choices or Homosexual to Husband, What Some of You Were, which are all Australian accounts of people coming out of homosexuality. The Kingdom of God and the Homosexual is I suppose, an apology. Nurture is a very clear cause of homosexuality where there's been poor bonding. So in my case, my dad was very abusive, and what I call detached from him. I just did not like him. I used to fear when he'd come home from work. And so what I realized that I did was cut myself off from the masculine goodness that came through Dad to me. I also, with my mum, because my dad would belt me and beat me, I saw Mum actually side with him often, or usually tell him, Ron's done this today or whatever. And so I came to see her as my enemy. And I came to think, well, I can't really trust women. Woman, don't come past there. That is the boundary, because I can't trust you. And I desperately wanted male love. I desperately wanted to connect to masculinity in a way that I felt that I was deprived of. One of the key psychological drives of homosexuality is what is called cannibal compulsion. This sense that I see in you what I don't have, and I want to take that into myself, in the insecurity of my masculinity, and that becomes sexualized.
I was about 18 at the time. Things hadn't changed, and yet I still didn't want to give up hope. And so I went and I tried something else. The one-on-one counselling sessions, it was often, an hour each week. I'd sit there and we'd go through, again, some of the reasons. It was mostly about the reasons why I might be gay and about what I can do to improve and combat those reasons that may have affected me in my early childhood. They'd often say things like overbearing mum or distant dad, and my mum wasn't overbearing and my dad wasn't really distant, and yet for me, I kind of tried to almost make them that, like saying, oh, my dad, used to be late for work, so he must have been a distant dad, or, my mum was really nice and loving to me, so she must have been overbearing. But I look back now and obviously I realise that's not the case. It's like most people's parents.
I think there was a topic called the mother wound. And I was talking about how you're related to your mother, because I think a lot of our issues stem from our relationships with our parents. And so I obviously honed in on the mother wound because my mom and I, while I was growing up, had quite a challenged relationship, because I always felt that my mom was, quite demanding and expecting a lot out of me, and I had to be this perfect girl for her to be happy for me. At that time, that's exactly what I thought, and that's why I that's why I had issues, because my mom was like that. And so in fact, I think when I was with Living Waters, my relationship with my mom was very strained, because at that time I guess there was a lot of blame. I was blaming her a lot for what I was going through, and I just couldn't deal with her at that time.
I've been working as a psychologist for over 20 years now, and most of that time specialising in the area of people who are same-sex attracted. It's interesting because when I look back at my life when I was in Exodus, what I did see was a huge amount of psychological torment and conflict. And so I think that, on reflection, was probably a central part of my decision to become a psychologist. All psychological evidence out there, as evidenced by the largest psychological associations in the world, saying homosexuality is not a disorder. It's part of the natural diversity of being a human. One of the things that I've found, which has been quite horrific, has been the sort of psychological damage I've seen with people who've been through various ex-gay programs. Some of the clients that I've seen, and I must say, are the most damaged people I've almost ever met in my entire life, and that includes having worked in maximum security prisons with maximum security prisoners.
The outcome of participating in Evergreen, for me, was major depression, attempted suicides, feeling like I didn't measure up, feeling like I wasn't worthy. Yeah, feeling like I felt like I was less than a person, that I
completed the first Joy of Hope program that I did. I did the whole 60 days, completed it. Thought for a few months that things were okay, that things were getting better. But then things started to pop up. Had thoughts about other men again. Really just nothing was changing. So I thought, maybe I didn't do it right the first time. Maybe I didn't give it my all. Maybe I didn't pray enough. Maybe I didn't, read the Bible enough, or just all these things that were wrong about me for it not to work. And so I went and I did it again. I remember going home when I was doing Door of Hope, going home from school, and just, it would have been, at least every second day just crying my eyes out, and just because things weren't happening and I was failing or something, it just wasn't right. And I just felt more and more, I think, as I went through those programs, I felt more and more as if God didn't love me rather than as if he loved me.
When you go through a process such as the ones that happen in the ex-gay programs, which in a way promote what I believe is psychologically unhealthy dynamics within a person, such as your true nature is heterosexuality. You've been damaged. If you repair the damage, you might be able to get married. If not, you can be celibate and live life according to God's plans. But that's not an expression of the self. And so what happens is that people can fail over and over and over and over again, live a life that's not according to their values because they want to have sex, and they end up doing that in ways that don't express who they are. There's a huge range of reasons why people can become extremely disturbed about themselves. The sense of failure can lead to depression. They can feel defective, that they're not able to somehow escape this stuff. And unfortunately, what can happen for some of these people is that they can unfortunately go ahead and suicide. There are people I know personally who attempted suicide as a result of being in these programs.
At that time, there was no hope for a person who was gay in the church and couldn't change. There was no hope. There was no alternative option. There was no message of anything other than homosexuality is wrong, you need to change. And so for me, the church was everything. And when you don't have that hope anymore, you don't have that reason for living anymore, then you get to a point you just don't want to. I remember sitting outside of the church building, and I remember my Connect leader was there with me, and I rolled up my sleeves. And for the first time I showed somebody scars on my arms, and that I was self-harming, and he said to me, he's like, Satan's trying to get to you, and you can't let him win, and things can still get better. And still, even at that stage, I still wanted to trust him so badly. I still believe that things could get better. Self-harm got worse. The depression escalated, and I attempted suicide a few times. I honestly, I look back and I honestly don't know how I survived.
Since the release of my autobiography, Life of Unlearning, I have literally had thousands of emails from individuals, and also met with many, many people all over the world who've told me their stories about what happened to them within an ex-gay program or within a Christian context where they tried to change their sexual orientation. These are the common themes. Suicide happens. I've heard of numerous stories. Attempted suicides, depression, self-destructive behaviours, and obsessive behaviours. These are common things. It's like a blueprint in every one of their stories.
Do reparative programs lead to mental illness? Not that I have noticed or experienced. I read with shock somebody writing on a website that people had committed suicide after doing Living Waters. I would love to see the statistics because that has never happened. And I don't know of any who have become mentally ill as a result of this program. What I can say is that I've seen people come to healing through the Living Waters program from mental illness because, again, like so often mental illness is caused from trauma that's happened in relationship in their lives, and again from a poverty of love.
I think what a lot of people in the ex-gay movement need to realise is what happens to these people after they leave the program. They talk about their success stories, or people just disappear out of the group and there is no duty of care, they don't follow up, and these people are in a terrible place with an enormous sense of failure and all these other mental pressures and stress upon them, and it's a very, very vulnerable time.
I remember a friend of mine asking me about 3 years into it, she said, "So do you think you're cured? Do you think you're healed?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, totally." You know, I was driving the car and she was also involved in a group in another city. And I said, "Yeah, I'm totally healed." And deep down, I probably believed it at the time because I was fully committed to what I was doing. And, you know, you get to a point where you think, if I don't expose myself to things, I can manage this. And it becomes this whole management thing. And you just manage your life that way. And you become an expert at it. And I guess in a way, I probably use Living Waters as a crutch because it helped me stay safe within that sort of confines of being with people who are praying for me and who understood what I was going through. I think when I left Living Waters, I needed another crutch. So I became a workaholic. I was working 60 to 80 hours a week for about 5 years. By the end of it, about 2005, I had high blood pressure, I had chest pains, and I went to a counselor, and he said, if you don't stop working, like in the next month, you're gonna hit rock bottom, and it'll be very hard to recover you. And he goes, you've got to resign from your job, and you've got to just have a break. So I quit my job, and then I took a year off, and that's when it started to hit me. And I was bawling my eyes out every day for almost a year. I'd be driving through the motorway in Auckland, crying for no reason. And I was like, what's going on with me? It's because I had no crutch anymore.
One of the problems with Exodus, and you can see it on their website, is that they say that they promote freedom from homosexuality, and they give stories about people who've been cured. It would be like saying freedom from having eyes and ears, freedom from being you. So what tends to happen is it actually promotes the idea of behaving in a way that isn't consistent with who you are.
I guess that my time in the ministry was an incredibly successful time. You know, when I finally resigned, which is 20 years this year, since I resigned from the ministry, I had pioneered churches. I'd been a youth pastor. I started evangelistic ministry. I started Youth Alive here in New South Wales. I met a lovely girl and I thought that this would be the answer. This ring does represent 16 wonderful years of my life, you know, and I had a very loving and devoted wife, and we had a very good relationship as much as we could within that context. And of course, I adored my 2 daughters. But of course, in the background was this other part of me, which I could never, ever resolve. And so what happens is you become more and more fragmented. So the Christian self presents to everybody and everyone thinks that they're wonderful. But in the background, because the gay self within the mind is very much the dark self, that you will allow the gay self to get away with things and do things that the Christian self would never, ever dream of doing. That created for me a sexual addiction. That was what I experienced in that myself through trying to suppress my true self. But I was probably unaware of the emotional toll as well upon me.
I remember thinking all my holidays were about being in an isolated island and just being on my own and getting away from it all. My dream was always running away. And now I look back and I think that totally explains it, why I always wanted to run away, because I didn't like my life, even though I ticked all the boxes. I was going to the right church. I had the right friends and had great friends. I had a lot of great Christian friends. I had a great career. I was living a very fulfilling life, but this was in a box somewhere.
Ultimately, after 6 years, I was able to start to confess to a friend what I was going through. And he would speak forgiveness to me, just, you've confessed sin. And he would pray for the deep trouble in my heart. And slowly, over 3 years really, the power of the homosexuality broke. And I came to see and contemplate the glory and the beauty of Jesus. And what I was looking for in man actually fell away. And towards the end of that time, I began to become attracted to Ruth. I was 42 or something. And wow, this is an experience in 42 years I've never had, looking at a woman and seeing her. And it wasn't just her physical beauty, certainly it was that, but it was, just really appreciating the inner beauty that shone through. Occasionally, if I am anxious or something like that, there might be a thought, not that I need another man, but sort of the thought. It's more the thought of the image somehow. I'll be aware, that the male might be attractive. I don't have a second look. I'm just aware of the fact, there's a person there with strength. The other day, quite frankly, I'm driving down Rocky Point Road here, and there was a guy, and I just happened to notice the strength of his legs, and I just kept driving. But probably heterosexual men notice the strength of other men's legs. I am heterosexual, but heterosexual men who haven't had a same-sex attraction probably notice the strength of other men's legs. But I didn't then try to grab a look at his backside or anything like that. I'm fulfilled. I've got a beautiful wife, wonderful children, just so great, and a ministry, in terms of just helping others through the depth and all the challenges and problems of life.
I went to Thailand, ironically, to visit a Pentecostal minister friend of mine who was a missionary over there. And as I was flying out of Bangkok, I looked down and saw all the people there, and I saw Bangkok, and I started to cry because I started to realize that 97% of these people, according to what I'd been taught as a kid with fundamentalist Christianity, are all going to hell because they haven't accepted Jesus into their life. They haven't given their life to Christ. They haven't become born again. They are people who are Buddhist, and they're going to hell. And I thought, what? And as I was flying out of there, the whole thing, Exodus, the theology, the fundamentalist Christianity, everything just started to collapse in my head. It all melted away. And I was just sitting there stunned thinking, okay, what's left? What am I doing? And it all just melted away. I was really then left with me. And I thought, and this sense of congruence. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to work out how to connect with being gay in a way that's true to my values. I'm going to do that. I don't know how. I don't have a reference point, but I have to leave Exodus. I have to be true to myself. And I can't remember feeling so happy and so incredibly, in a way, emancipated.
After I attempted suicide, I was in such a bad place. I was crying out to God, and I said, God, I can't go on. I can't do this anymore. For me, you can call it what you will, but for me, it was a supernatural thing, and God was so there, more present than I've ever sensed Him before, and it was just simple words. I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And it was more clear than I've ever heard before in my life. And it was just simple words. But from that moment, I knew I was loved by God as a gay man, and nothing that anybody says, nothing that anybody does will ever change the fact that God loves me.
Interestingly enough, last Saturday was 20 years to the day when it all changed for me. And I met a man, and something happened in that encounter with that man that had never happened before, and that was that I let my guard down. It wasn't long after that, within days actually, that it was like things going off inside me, and I discovered that really I had fallen in love with a man. And in falling in love with a man, I was forced to face the reality that this 22 years of ex-gay programs, all these numerous attempts, and now 16 years of marriage and 2 children, nothing had changed in me. And it was then, I guess, I was forced to face the reality. You will have to be like this for the rest of your life. And it was at that point I knew I couldn't preach again.
I actually had a lot of respect for the people in the group because I think they honestly really believed that it would work. And I made some good friends with the people in the group because I thought, wow, these people are so committed and they genuinely want people to live a life of wholeness. And when you hear that message, you want to be a part of that, because if you believe that homosexuality is wrong, you'll be attracted to that kind of community because it's about wholeness, and I wanted to be whole, but in the end I thought, I can't do this. I've just got to maybe somehow find another way, and sort of just kind of slowly, quietly slipped away from the group. At 37 years old, I thought I could be 50 and still be wondering about this, and I miss out on a whole lot of living. And I didn't want to be 50 and be wondering. I've done everything I could. I've read every book available in every Christian bookstore. I've done the program. I've prayed, and I've begged God to take it away, and I've asked Him to change me. But I still wake up in the morning feeling the same way. I met Leslie online. The pink sofa. We've been together since, and it's been we've known each other for 3.5 years. My mom sent me an email this morning, and she said, "You're really happy." And that's my mother, who's totally Christian and really, really black and white. And in the end, I realized that I'm not even saying to them that I'm happy. They're just seeing it. That actually suddenly I'm now this totally open person, that I can relate to her now. I mean, my relationship with my mom since I came out just shot up maybe 150%. We've got an amazing relationship. I love hanging out with her. I love spending time with her, and just life has changed.
I still can't help but love the church and just hope and pray that one day things will change, and that the message that a 16-year-old in the seats at church will get is not one of change, but is one of hope, and is one of welcome and is one of love. Because if that happens, then everything that I went through, nobody will have to go through it again. And that'll be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm just about to go into do a course at the private hospital where they talk about post-traumatic stress disorders and depressive illnesses. Yeah, and that's something that I've never done before because the depression still affects me. So it's something that I think I'll always work on because in the back of my mind I still think that there's something wrong with me. Logically I know that there's nothing wrong with me, but because it's been drummed into me for so long and at such a young age, I have to... I guess what I'm trying to say is I have to work at reprogramming myself. I'm gay. God still loves me. There's nothing wrong with me. And I just need to keep telling myself that.
Because what happens is, you know, I stand there and become very present, and I look around and I know almost everybody's story and I know what they've been through. And to know that they have come to this place where they will walk up that street with their head held high, and I know that some haven't made it, you know, it just becomes incredibly emotional for me.
You know, it's kind of funny how everything happens, but I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. I've got parents who love me, I've got an amazing partner who loves God just like I do.
You know, in the church they'll say to you that you came out because you're weak, because you caved in. I wish you can experience the freedom I feel now, having come out and having had the courage. I mean, this necklace is actually quite, says courage. And I got that done because I realized that actually what I was doing was a very courageous thing.
So my parents have come an enormously long way since I came out from them. You know, last night I was there with my parents, holding their hands, marching in the Mardi Gras. And I've never seen my dad and my mum so proud. And that's a pretty cool thing.
There's no going back. I haven't cried since. I've, you know, probably cry when I watch sad movies or chick flicks and stuff. But, you know, that depth of crying that I experienced for many, many years, I haven't had that in a long time. The kind of holidays I dream about now are things like, let's go and explore and just live and really go out and really enjoy ourselves. No longer, I realized, I was thinking about it this morning, I thought, I don't want to run away anymore. It's no longer about running away, it's now about living my life. And I was, you know, I look back and I think, gosh, I wish I'd done this sooner.